During the debate over the Affordable Care Act and, of course, the subsequent attempts to repeal it 43 times, Republican lawmakers have insisted that they would have another plan to replace what they dubbed Obamacare with an actual conservative health care plan. That's sort of ironic because the ACA was originally a conservative health care plan blueprint, floated by the Heritage Foundation and, of course, successfully instituted and implemented in Massachusetts, by the way. I believe they have 97% of their people covered by health insurance. Anyway, when someone would ask about this new conservative health care plan, a lot of Republicans would usually come up with something very vague to describe it, basically along the lines of, well, it's patient-centered and free market-based. But they would never really come up with anything all that substantive. That is until, of course, just recently when the Republicans revealed a look at their possible alternative to the Affordable Care Act. Now, so Senators Tom Coburn and Richard Burr actually revealed this new alternative system that claims to lower health care costs and try to cover more people. Sort of like the same, the same goals of course, Obamacare. Now, it would end pre-existing condition limitations for those who remain continuously insured. Now, that's very important. It's kind of like car insurance, in a way. You stay consistently insured, and you actually get lower costs through that. That means if you lose your job and your health insurance and immediately purchase the plan on the individual market, your insurance company couldn't actually use your medical history to set higher prices. Now, if your coverage did lapse, however, there would be a possibility of facing new underwriting fees when purchasing an individual plan. Now, contrast that to Obamacare, where it actually gets rid of a lot of these underwriting fees completely. Another part of this Republican health care plan would be eliminating the individual mandate. And that would actually be incredibly popular right now because a lot of people don't like being told that they have to purchase insurance. Now, the Republican replacement plan would also let Americans use tax credits to purchase insurance coverage if they earn less than 300% of the poverty line. Now, that's about $36,000 for an individual. It would actually eliminate the ability for anyone who is not pregnant, who is not a pregnant woman or is a child to actually receive Medicaid, and instead give those people that are below the poverty line tax credits instead in order to buy insurance. Something that they would also get rid of in this plan is the health insurance exchanges. They're not going to help you out. They're not going to have a one-stop shop like the Obamacare exchanges. They're going to make you go out and just browse the normal plan, the normal way, the way that we used to do things. They would also allow insurers to charge older subscribers at least 5 times as much in order to lower premiums for younger people. So, let's screw grandma to help Sean. Now, it's also assumed, and it hasn't been scored by the CBO yet, but it's assumed that the subsidies included in this health insurance plan were actually less generous, or would be less generous, than the subsidies in place in the Affordable Care Act. Now, of course, a Republican plan would also reveal a lot of the taxes, like the medical device tax, and, of course, reduce a lot of taxes on the industries that were used to pay for the health insurance program that would actually help pay for the subsidies. In their place, of course, is a limit on the tax exclusion for employer-sponsored insurance. Now, of course, ending or eliminating or limiting this health insurance tax exclusion actually means it's the same exact health benefit package that people who are covered with employer-sponsored insurance, and that's, of course, 65% of people, by the way, that have insurance, 65% of workers. It actually could get a whole lot more expensive, as it makes employers want to purchase more expensive health plans, because those expensive health plans would be tax preferred. So with all of that information out there, I want to ask you guys, what do you think about this supposed replacement to the ACA? Is it terrible or a viable alternative? Sean, I want to ask you.
It's not great by any stretch, and I'm not a fan of the of Obamacare either, but it's not great. It has some good things in there which I want to touch on, but basically what this is is Obamacare minus the mandate and a few other things moved around. Now, getting rid of the mandate is awesome, and I'm totally in favor of that. But the plan actually isn't really that much different. The few good things that are in the plan are the treating the employer healthcare more like an individual healthcare market, because what we have now is your employer is incentivized to give you health insurance. So essentially, your insurance is tied to your job because that insurance is a lot cheaper, and the individual policies are ridiculously expensive. So I'm actually in favor of treating employer insurance like individual policies. Now, I'm surprised that the Republicans didn't give you a tax credit, because this would have been more popular for your individual policy rather than raising the tax on the employer policy, which effectively that's what it does. But basically, you don't want people to be tied. It doesn't make any sense for people to be tied to their job for their health insurance, in my opinion. And overall, that's a positive. But this isn't really that different from the current healthcare law. Like, it doesn't, like, I'm surprised it didn't have anything about like medical health savings accounts or anything that would incentivize you to negotiate on certain things more. Like, right now we have a system which is totally third party payer, and the only places where healthcare costs go down are where insurance, Medicare, and Medicaid aren't involved. And the biggest example of that is LASIK, the eye surgery, which it keeps getting less and less expensive because it's paid for by an individual, and they negotiate on prices, and that incentivizes innovation. Like, none of that's in here, and that's all free market jargon that the Republicans usually play up, and it's just not present in this law. So I'm going to vote bad, but tiny things are good. But it's like Obamacare. It's bad, but some things are good in it.
Yeah, it sort of seems a little bit like Obamacare Lite is what I would like to call it, because that's what it really seems. It keeps a couple of the good things, but really it's basically them saying, okay, we're just going to take good things about Obamacare and we're going to get rid of taxes.
It might be more liberal than Obamacare because they cut the subsidies, and I know the subsidies supposedly go to poor people, but they actually go to the insurance companies. Like, you're being subsidized to buy a private product. So in weird ways, like, you're not mandated to buy it, you're encouraged to buy it, which I don't know what that means, but that was in the article. And there's less subsidies, which end up going in the pockets of insurance companies. So in weird ways, it's actually more liberal than Obamacare.
Disagree with that. This isn't liberal at all. This is still a conservative healthcare plan, and it still punishes people who don't get insurance, but it lets the insurance companies do the punishing by raising underwriting fees for not being continuously insured. And I don't think it does nearly enough to help poor people. But Jordan, I want to get you in on this and see what you have to say.
Yeah, to your point, I get what Sean's saying, but it doesn't seem liberal at all. And of course, the reason for that is because it's a move to the right of Obamacare, which is not liberal at all. The reason why this seems like Obamacare Lite is because Republicans wrote Obamacare. Your three chief sources for Obamacare, where it really gets its bones from, is the Republican alternative to Clinton's proposed health care reforms in the 90s, the plan passed by Mitt Romney in Massachusetts, and the mandate comes from the frickin' Heritage Foundation, which is like the most right-wing think tank out of right-wing think tanks. That's why this seems like Obamacare Lite, because we've already started with the Republican goal, or with the Republican plan idea, I guess. Yeah, the Republican plan. So this is just, it's too little, too late. Like, one, credit where credit's due. Like, okay, you guys have finally put forth an alternative to Obamacare. And I know a lot of Republicans say, oh no, during the debate we put forth this many bills. You look at those bills, they're all pretty much, let's keep the status quo. So like that's not an alternative plan. Like, just because you put it in writing didn't mean you had an alternative plan. Actually, Obamacare was your alternative plan, and Obama latched onto it and said, you know what, not only am I going to throw out single payer, I'll even throw out a public option, and I'll take this conservative plan. And so he started the conversation right there. So all arguments were to the extreme right of our possibilities for reform. So yeah, it's too little, too late. Like it's not a great plan. I'll get into that later on in my rant. But even if it was like this was, if you had had this conversation during the initial debate, then we could get into what I'm about to talk about, like some of the problems with it. But you know, as it is now, like I mean, why are you're trying to? You had your chance. It's over. The election has been passed. The Supreme Court has declared it constitutional. You've tried to repeal it 40 times. Like, let's work to actually fix the thing. And this is a step in the right direction towards actually fixing it. Although it's a repeal and replace alternative, it actually is a viable alternative. So maybe at this rate, within 6 years, they'll actually be working to make Obamacare a decent bill. But so my big two things that come of this is one, and Sean kind of touched on this, like there's a lot of not Republican ideas in here. Like, why are there no exchanges? That's a market-based solution. That's competition. The idea that these interstate exchanges are there and help lower prices through competition. So if you're the market-based solution party, why do you take out that part of the bill? Like that should be the part of Obamacare that these guys are totally into. Now I get that the government runs a lot of these exchanges, but you know, okay, whatever. Give the states the right to control the exchanges, like Obamacare does. And hey, you've got places like Arkansas that have the private option. I say places, we're the only place. Our exchange started a private option, which is I have issues with it. People on the right have issues with it, but it's what compromise looks like. I apologize, my phone's not on silent. But anyway, and the private option is actually threatened in Arkansas right now, which is crazy. But anyway, so there's that. And then the other thing, though, is ultimately, at the end of the day, why this would have failed or why this should have failed, even if it had been proposed when it should have been proposed during the actual healthcare reform debate, is that now I can see this is me arguing from theory, not from data, because as you mentioned, this hasn't been passed into law, so the CBO hasn't really examined it yet, or this hasn't been brought before Congress, so the CBO hasn't examined it yet. So their data may come out and contradict with what I'm saying, and I will concede that if it happens. But from where I'm at right now, the outside looking in, I doubt that this proposal would have insured many more people, if any, than the status quo. And the reason I say that is based on data, because we have the data that shows if you offer somebody $5 now or $10 in 2 weeks, they're going to take $5 now, even though $10 is more money, and they'd be better off financially doing that. Even though this, the penalty for having to, if you get out of the insurance market and then try to get back in later, the penalty is much higher than the fine you pay now for not having insurance. It's still going to be a less effective deterrent for people getting out of the market, because people think, whenever it comes to their finances, people think about the now. And studies have also shown that when scarcity increases, long-term responsible financial planning actually decreases. There's a negative correlation. And that's what you're going to see here. People are, even though they'll acknowledge, oh yeah, if something happens, I'm going to have to pay way more in the future, they're still going to take that option. A smaller fine that would seem like less of a deterrent, just because of the way human beings work, is more of a deterrent than a bigger fine down the road whenever you try to get back in, because it's what you have to pay now. And people, whenever it comes to money, think about what they have to pay now, not what they could have to pay later. And that's even enforced, too, because we think the same way about our health. So you've got two different areas. We don't think we're ever going to get unhealthy until it happens, and we don't think about spending money until we have to spend it. And so smaller penalties now to keep people in, like the fine they've got, even though it doesn't seem logical, it's just human beings aren't always logical, is a more effective system to keep people in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I want to address one point about the exchanges. The exchanges are simulating a market-oriented plan because our healthcare laws before the exchanges removed market forces. And to uncomplicate that, basically we all get our health insurance in general from our employer. So we don't look at the prices, right? Because employers are incentivized through tax credits to give us health insurance. So we don't give a shit. We don't go shopping for policy to policy. Like, if you get insurance from your employer, you get it from your employer. You don't care about the price. The exchanges were put up there because people were ignoring the prices because they got their plans from their employers. So they put the exchanges out there so you could see everything, and then you wanted to create competition and all that. But if the Republican plan really does treat individual plans the same as your employer-based plans, then people are going to naturally look to different insurance companies, because there's no real advantage of getting it from your employer, and there's no real, like, you're gonna have that competition that was naturally there, that was removed when we decided, for no logical reason, that employers should be the ones to provide health care. So like that's very overly complicated, but basically that if their plan does what it says it does, which I sincerely doubt, then that would make it more market oriented, because the exchanges are like the illusion of market oriented, if you get what I'm saying.
Well, there was a logical reason we decided employers should provide health care. It's way outdated and not efficient anymore, but there was a logical reason. It was because back in the day, the thinking was people who were able to work, able-bodied, were the people who would be cheaper to insure. Therefore, you tied it to work, and your insurance companies all started out as non-profits. They didn't have a lot of funding. It made sense. However, now what we've seen is undeniably, now obviously you can have a constitutional argument against this. Sean, you and I will disagree with this. I think I'm right. You think you're right. But from a data standpoint, it's undeniable that single payer is a better way to go. Although America may be unique in that aspect, when you have half of your government that not only believe, the Republican Party not only believes that government can't do anything right, but the Tea Party wing actively works to ensure that and make it a self-fulfilling prophecy, single payer may not work in America. I say that as a liberal because our government shuts down every other month.
Well, I just wanted to... Sorry, I just wanted to throw out kind of my own answer to this question that I asked. And what do I think about this plan overall is that I think it's even more of an giveaway to insurance companies. I think this helps insurance companies even more, and it helps corporations. It takes away all the different taxes from the corporations to help pay for the subsidies. It instead of subsidies, it gives a tax credit, which a tax credit's not really going to help somebody who's poor. I mean, they want to give somebody who's 300% below the poverty line a tax credit to help with their insurance. A tax credit, when you don't have any money, really makes it so you have a barrier to entry. You're not going to be able to get insurance, which of course there's no mandate, but nonetheless it's going to be more expensive to get into that insurance. And of course it would allow insurers to charge older people 5 times more than they do now. It may make sense in sort of a fiscal kind of way because, yeah, older people are going to use more medical care more often, but nonetheless, it seems like a lot of seniors probably won't be able to afford that, and you'll probably see them start to die off. Maybe I'm just being a little bit dramatic on that, but I think that's sort of what I see.
You're not being dramatic. I do need to fact check you though, just in the interest of honesty. It doesn't allow people. The proposed idea doesn't allow them to charge seniors 5 times more than they do now. It allows them to charge seniors, their oldest clients or customers, 5 times more than their youngest. Whereas under Obamacare, that number is only 3 times. So it certainly will cost the elderly more, but it's not 5 times more than they're charging them now. Yeah, and you brought up some great points there. Like those are things like where Jeff, you and I are going to be going to disagree with conservatives because those are ideological kind of standpoint, But at the same time, like that's what compromise is. I don't think Republicans want to have 300% of the poverty line. Like, if anything, they want, 200% of the poverty line. We want 400. You compromise at 300. Like, those are the parts I don't like, but that's what having a bipartisan discussion looks like. Ultimately, why I would be against this proposed budget, even if it had come up back in the day during the actual discussion, before it was a moot point, is because I don't think it'll work. You've created this, again, people are more concerned about what they have to spend now. They're going to get out of the healthcare industry, to save some money whenever they're healthy or whatever. And then whenever they get sick, they're not going to be able to afford to get back in because of these underwriting fees that are allowed. And so you're going to ultimately, except for the very wealthy who for whatever reason don't decide to get insurance, you're going to have people that can't afford insurance, which was what the problem was in the first place. To Sean's point, this is worse for the insurance companies. Again, this is going to tick off some liberals, but it's just, working within the real world, do we really want something that's going to screw over the insurance companies? And I say that, what I mean is, if we are not going to switch over to a single-payer system like every other country in the developed world that has better healthcare than we do, if we're going to stick with this archaic insurance, private for-profit system that put us in the situation in the first place, we don't want to screw over the people that are providing it. If we're going to make them all go bankrupt and not have an alternative in place to not, we don't have a public option or a single-payer system to pick up the slack, then we're going to have a huge healthcare crisis in America under this plan if it does, as Sean is suggesting, screw over the insurance companies. If all of a sudden they lose all their profit that they're provided by this mandate and they go away, then only the incredibly rich have health insurance, and there's going to be a huge run on hospitals. They're going to have budget issues. It's going to be chaos. So as much as I'm against, the system that we've got now, and as much as I do agree with you, Sean, it's totally a boondoggle for the not boondoggle. It's totally a boom for the insurance companies. If we're not going to abandon that system, then we need those insurance companies if that's the system we're going to pick.
But everybody in this room or in this hangout and the system, it's just how we do it that we disagree on. I think what insurance should be is in case you get into some kind of disastrous situation. And everything else you should be able to have, and I like the medical health savings account type idea, but everything else you should try and negotiate out of pocket. Like, you pay like $30-something for a box of gloves that your doctor uses in a procedure. If you knew that price from the beginning, there's no way you would pay that. Like, if you were incentivized as a consumer of healthcare to shop around, and I'm not talking about like disaster care. Like, to me, that's what insurance is for, if it's a disaster. But if you're incentivized to shop around, then in certain instances, like LASIK, the other example, which is hilarious, is boob jobs. Like, prices will fall because people will innovate to make things more available. I mean, the government insurance covers glasses, and glasses are too expensive for what they are, and it doesn't cover LASIK, and LASIK went from like $20,000 per eyeball down to like $500 per eyeball. Like, if you're incentivized to negotiate in prices personally and not have a third party, then you will bring healthcare costs down.
But we don't have a third party. The government doesn't negotiate for prices in America. That's part of the problem.
We do have insurance companies are a third party.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay, I'm with you. Well, but then so the progressive answer to that then is give the government power to negotiate prices like every other developed country that had our healthcare system than us.